The sun had already climbed high over the endless stretch of desert plains when the Cowboys rode out that morning. The land was dry, cracked, and glowing like gold under the sharp light. The men were quiet as they moved along the old cattle trail, dust rising behind their horses. They had been out for days, guiding a herd through lonely country where the wind carried nothing but the sound of insects and the faint echo of hooves. Among them rode Jack Turner, a man not much for talking. He was older than most in the group, his face lined by sun and time. His eyes were calm, steady, and filled with something the others couldn't quite name. Patience, maybe, or quiet understanding. The younger riders often said he had seen too much life to be surprised by anything anymore. By noon, the air grew hotter. Even the horses were slowing down, snorting and shaking their heads against the heat. The men decided to stop by a patch of shade near a cluster of rocks. While the others unpacked canteens and talked softly, Jack looked across the flat stretch of sand that shimmered like a mirage. He thought he saw something small, barely moving. At first, he thought it was just a trick of the light. The desert had many ways of fooling a man's eyes. But when he squinted, he saw it again, a figure faint and unsteady walking slowly toward the rocks. "Hey," he said quietly, pointing. The others turned their heads, shading their eyes. "Probably a coyote," one of them muttered. "No," Jack replied, his voice low. "That's a person." The men watched as the figure stumbled closer. It was a woman. Her clothes were torn and dusty, her face pale under the bright sky. She was walking like her legs could give out any moment. When she reached the edge of the rocks, she collapsed to her knees. For a moment, nobody moved. Out here, it wasn't common to see strangers, especially someone alone and in that condition. The men exchanged uncertain looks. Some were cautious. Others didn't know what to do. But Jack was already off his horse. He walked slowly toward her, his boots pressing into the dry ground. The woman lifted her head weakly. Her lips were cracked from thirst, and her voice was barely a whisper. "Please, water." Jack knelt beside her, pulling his canteen from his belt. He opened it and held it carefully to her mouth, letting her drink small sips. She tried to drink more, but he stopped her gently. "Slow down," he said softly. "Too fast and it'll make you sick." The other cowboys watched from a distance. Some shook their heads, whispering among themselves. "We can't get involved," one said. "We don't know who she is or what happened." But Jack ignored them. He could see the pain in her eyes, the way her hands trembled as she held onto the canteen. She was trying to speak, to explain, but her voice kept breaking. "It's all right," he told her. "You're safe now. Just rest." He spread his old coat over the sand to make her a bit more comfortable. The woman closed her eyes, breathing slowly, trying to gather strength. Jack asked the others for help. "We can't leave her here," he said. One of the younger cowboys shook his head. "Jack, we're already short on supplies. We don't know what trouble she's in. What if someone's after her?" Jack looked at them, his calm eyes steady. "If she were your sister, would you ride away?" The group fell silent. No one had an answer. Finally, one of them sighed. "All right, Jack, but only till she's strong enough to talk." "Then we move on," Jack nodded. That was all he needed. He built a small shade using a blanket and tied it between the rocks. He offered her small pieces of dried bread and more water. After some time, color began to return to her face. When the wind cooled a little in the evening, she opened her eyes again. Jack sat nearby, sharpening his knife on a stone, not out of threat but habit. When he noticed she was awake, he smiled slightly. "Feeling any better?" he asked. She nodded weakly. "A little. Thank you." Her voice was soft, almost unsure. He handed her another sip of water. "You've been walking a long way," he said. "You from around here?" She hesitated. Her eyes drifted toward the horizon, where the sun was dipping low. "No," she said finally. "I don't even know where I am." The silence stretched between them. Jack didn't push her. He knew sometimes people needed time before they could speak about what had brought them to such a place. As the stars began to appear, the other cowboys built a small fire. The woman sat quietly near it, wrapped in a spare blanket. She watched the flames dance, her eyes reflecting a deep sadness that none of them could fully understand. The men ate in silence. From time to time, they glanced at her, curiosity and concern mixing in their faces. Only Jack spoke softly to her now and then, asking simple questions, her name if she had family nearby. But she avoided most of them. When the night grew colder, Jack gave her his coat again. She looked at him surprised. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. Jack looked into the fire before answering. Because once someone helped me when I had nothing left. Guess I'm just returning the favor. The woman didn't say anything, but a faint smile appeared on her lips. It was small, but it was the first time she had smiled since she arrived. Later that night, when everyone was asleep, Jack stayed awake for a while watching the stars. The desert was quiet except for the whisper of wind against the sand. He thought about the woman, how she had appeared out of nowhere, lost and weak, yet still walking, still fighting to live. There was strength in her, even if she didn't know it yet. He didn't know her story. Maybe she had run from something. Maybe she had lost her way. But whatever it was, he felt something deep inside, a sense that finding her that day wasn't just chance. The next morning, when the sun rose again, she was still sleeping, breathing peacefully for the first time in who knows how long. The others were already packing up, ready to move on. One of them asked quietly, "What are we going to do with her, Jack?" He looked toward her and then back at the road ahead. "We're not leaving her," he said simply. "Not until she's safe." And with that, the Cowboys mounted their horses again. Jack stayed behind a little longer, watching the woman rest under the morning light. He knew there was more to her story, a truth waiting behind her silence. Whatever it was, he was ready to hear it when she was ready to tell it. As he turned toward the horizon, the wind shifted, carrying the scent of dust and hope. Somewhere beyond those hills, answers waited. But for now, all that mattered was that one man had stopped when everyone else kept riding, and that small act of kindness had changed everything. The woman woke to the sound of horses moving and the faint clatter of tin cups. Morning light spilled across the sand, warm and gentle. For the first time in days, she felt safe enough to breathe without fear. The smell of coffee drifted in the air, and she opened her eyes to see Jack sitting near the fire, stirring the pot slowly. He looked up and smiled. "Morning. You slept well?" She nodded, sitting up carefully. "I think I did. Thank you for everything." Jack poured her a small cup of coffee and handed it over. "Drink slow. You still need to rest." The other Cowboys were already getting ready to ride. They spoke quietly among themselves, still unsure about the stranger they had found. But no one said anything against Jack. His word carried weight among them, not because he demanded it, but because he had earned their respect. As the sun climbed higher, the woman seemed a little stronger. She tried to stand, wobbling slightly, but Jack caught her arm. "Easy now," he said gently. "You'll get there." She looked around, her eyes scanning the endless land. "Where exactly are we?" "About a day's ride from the nearest town," Jack said. "If we start soon, we can reach before sunset." She hesitated, as if unsure whether she wanted to go there at all. "I'm not sure I should," she began, then stopped herself. Jack didn't press her. "You don't have to decide right now," he said simply. "Just ride with us till you feel ready." The Cowboys packed up and started moving again. The woman rode behind Jack, holding onto the saddle horn. The horse's gentle motion and the sound of hooves made her drowsy, but she stayed awake, watching the land unfold before her. Dry hills, scattered shrubs, and a sky so wide it looked endless. Hours passed. Jack rode beside her most of the way, quietly keeping an eye on her. She noticed how calm he always seemed, how he never spoke more than he needed to. It made her feel safe. By midday, they stopped by a small stream cutting through the rocks. The horses drank eagerly, and the men took turns filling their canteens. Jack helped the woman down and led her to the water. "Take your time," he said. "You've come a long way." She knelt beside the stream, cupping her hands to drink. The cool water felt like a gift. For a long moment, she just stared at her reflection. Her face was tired, but her eyes held something new: hope. Jack sat on a rock nearby, watching her carefully. After a while, she turned to him. "You must be wondering who I am," she said quietly. Jack smiled faintly. "I figure you'll tell me when you're ready." She nodded, taking a deep breath. "My name's Anna." He nodded once, waiting. "I was working out at a ranch about 2 days' walk from here," she said slowly. "It wasn't easy work, but it was honest. Then one morning I woke up and everything had gone wrong. The owner, he disappeared. There were strangers at the gate. I didn't know who they were, but they started asking for things, papers, money. I just ran. I walked for hours until I couldn't anymore." Her voice shook slightly, but she didn't cry. "I didn't know where I was going. I just kept walking." Jack listened quietly, never interrupting. When she finished, she looked down. "You probably think I'm foolish." Running like that, Jack shook his head. No, sometimes running is the only thing that keeps you alive. You did what you had to do. She looked at him, surprised by his words. Most people would have judged or questioned her, but Jack spoke with such calm certainty that she felt a strange peace settle inside her. They rested there until the heat passed, then continued toward town. The trail curved between dry hills that slowly gave way to open plains. As the sun lowered, they saw the faint outline of buildings in the distance. A small town, dusty and quiet, with smoke rising from chimneys. When they arrived, the townsfolk looked at them curiously. It wasn't often a group of cowboys rode in with a tired woman among them. Jack helped Anna down and guided her to the shade outside a small inn. You can stay here, he said. I'll cover the cost for a few nights. She looked up at him unsure. You don't have to do that, he smiled lightly. I know, but I want to. The innkeeper, an older woman with kind eyes, brought Anna a bowl of soup and a clean bed. Jack waited outside, talking to the stable hand, making sure the horses were fed. When he returned to check on her, she was already half asleep, her hands folded under her head, a faint smile on her lips. For the next few days, Jack and his men stayed in town to rest. Anna recovered her strength quickly. Sometimes she would help the innkeeper with chores, sometimes just sit outside and watch the road. Every time Jack passed by, she'd wave and he'd tip his hat in return. But Jack knew she wasn't ready to stay alone yet. There was still a look in her eyes, a quiet fear that hadn't faded completely. One evening, as the sky turned orange, Anna found Jack by the corral, brushing his horse. She hesitated before speaking. Jack, what will you do next? Head north, he said. We've got another job waiting, moving cattle up to the valley. She looked down. And after that? Jack smiled. Haven't thought that far ahead. Anna was silent for a moment. Then softly she said, I don't want to stay here. Not alone. Jack stopped brushing the horse and looked at her. You're welcome to come with us, he said simply. It won't be easy, but you'll be safe. Her eyes filled with quiet gratitude. Thank you, she whispered. The next morning she joined them. Dressed in borrowed clothes and riding a gentle mare, she looked stronger than before. The cowboys greeted her warmly now. She had earned their respect just by surviving what she had been through. As they rode out of town, Anna looked back one last time, then forward, toward the open land. The fear that once held her heart had turned into courage. Days passed as they traveled together. She learned to ride better, to cook over a fire, even to laugh again. The men treated her like family, and Jack watched with quiet pride as she grew stronger. One night, as they camped under a sky full of stars, Anna sat beside the fire with Jack. You know, she said softly, if you hadn't stopped that day, I don't think I'd be here now. Jack poked at the fire with a stick, his expression thoughtful. Maybe, he said, but I think you would have made it somehow. You've got a strong spirit, she smiled. You think so? I know so, he said with a grin. For a long moment they just sat there in silence, watching the flames. Around them the world felt peaceful, the kind of peace that comes only after a storm. From that day on, Anna rode with the Cowboys as one of them. She worked hard, helped where she could, and carried a quiet strength that inspired everyone around her. People in towns they passed through would sometimes ask who she was, and Jack would just smile and say, someone worth helping. The men never forgot how she had arrived, lost and tired, walking through the desert alone, and how one simple act of kindness had changed both her life and theirs. In time, stories spread about the group who rode across the plains with a woman among them, brave and steady. Some said she had been saved by luck, others said by grace. But those who knew the truth said it was neither. It was kindness that saved her, the kind that asks for nothing in return. And long after their paths went separate ways, Anna never forgot the man who stopped when everyone else kept riding. She would tell his name softly to anyone who asked how she had survived. Jack Turner, she'd say. He was the one who gave me water when I needed it most. And somewhere out on the plains, under that endless sky, the wind carried her words like a prayer, gentle, timeless, and true.